Picture a city so wealthy, so massive, so advanced that when Europeans finally found it centuries later, they looked at it and said, Africans couldn't have built this. They were wrong, because that lie didn't just insult a civilization, it tried to erase one. This is the story of Great Zimbabwe, a city built entirely from stone, without a single drop of mortar holding it together. A city that ruled over more than 150 smaller kingdoms. A city that controlled the gold flowing out of an entire region and sent it as far as China. But here's the twist. This empire didn't fall to war. It didn't fall to invasion. Something quieter took it down, and historians are still arguing about exactly what. Therefore, by the end of this video, you are going to understand not just how this city rose, but why the story of its fall got hijacked for over 100 years by people who refused to accept the truth. Walk with me as I take you on another journey through the eyes of history. Somewhere between 1200 and 1300 AD, in the rolling hills of what's now Zimbabwe, a group of Shona-speaking people began building something nobody in that region had ever attempted. Not huts, not wooden palisades, stone. They called their clusters of stone buildings Zimbabwe, meaning houses of stone in the Shona language. And this particular one grew so large, so fast, that it simply became known as the Great Zimbabwe. But this wasn't just piling rocks on top of each other. The builders shaped granite blocks with such precision that the walls stood and still stand, 700 years later, without any mortar at all. No cement, no binding agents, just stone, cut and stacked with so much exactness. At the heart of the city sat the Great Enclosure, a massive curved wall, over 30 feet high in places, wrapping around an area big enough to be the largest ancient structure south of the Sahara Desert. Therefore, when you stood inside those walls in the year 1300, you weren't looking at a village, you were looking at the capital of an empire. But a wall that big doesn't get built by accident. It gets built because someone has resources, someone has power, and someone that has something the rest of the world wants. That something was gold. Great Zimbabwe sat in almost the perfect spot, close enough to the gold fields inland to control the mining, but positioned along the routes that led straight out to the Indian Ocean coast. Therefore, the rulers of Great Zimbabwe didn't need to mine every ounce of gold themselves. They just needed to control who moved it and how. Gold, ivory, copper cast into distinctive egg-shaped ingots. These flowed out of the city toward coastal trading ports like Kiwa, off the coast of East Africa. But it didn't stop there. From Kiwa, those goods entered the trade network that stretched across the Indian Ocean to Arabia, to Persia, all the way to China. And what came back? Chinese porcelain, Persian glass beads, fine textiles, luxury goods that had crossed oceans just to end up in the hands of African royalty in the middle of the continent. Archaeologists have pulled pieces of that porcelain right out of the ground at Great Zimbabwe. Physical proof that this isolated African village, some colonial writers imagined, was actually plugged into a global economy centuries before Europe ever set foot there. At its peak, an estimated 18,000 people lived in and around the city, but numbers alone don't capture it. This was a city with a functioning economy, an artistic tradition, livestock herding, agriculture, and a ruling class wealthy enough to commission carved soapstone monuments just to represent their power. One of those monuments would end up being more important than anyone at the time could have guessed. Here's where it gets genuinely staggering. Great Zimbabwe wasn't ruling over empty land. It was the capital of a kingdom that, at its height, held authority over more than 150 smaller tributary states, each with its own local ruler, its own smaller Zimbabwe of stone buildings, all answering upward to the king at the center. Therefore, this wasn't a city. It was the head of a network, a taxation system, a trade monopoly, and a political hierarchy sprawling across a massive stretch of southern Africa, and carved into soapstone, standing on platforms within the city's hill complex, were figures of birds, tall stone monoliths, each one topped with a carved bird, believed to represent royal ancestors or spiritual messengers connecting the king to the divine. These weren't decoration. They were symbols of legitimacy, physical proof that this ruler's power came from somewhere sacred. Centuries later, one of these carved birds would end up on a national flag, but we'll come back to that. For now, understand this. Great Zimbabwe, at its peak around the 1300s and 1400s, was arguably one of the most powerful and wealthy political centers in the entire African interior. It should have lasted for centuries more, but it didn't. By the mid-1400s, something started going wrong, and here's the unsettling part. There is no single smoking gun, no invading army burned this city down. No single battle ended it. Instead, historians point to a slow convergence of pressures, each one feeding the next. Some point to climate. Long-term shifts and possible droughts may have hit the region hard, straining the farmland that fed thousands of people packed into one place. But others point to the land itself. A city of 18,000 people needs firewood, needs farmland, needs water. Over generations, deforestation and soil exhaustion may have quietly wrecked the very ground the city depended on. Some researchers even suspect the water source beneath the city. The underground aquifer may have run dry or become contaminated as the population grew. Therefore, even without a single catastrophe, daily life in Great Zimbabwe may have simply gotten harder year after year. And there's the gold. The deposits that made this city rich weren't infinite. As the easily accessible gold ran thinner, new trade routes opened up further north and west, bypassing Great Zimbabwe entirely and connecting directly to emerging power centers instead. The city's economic engine, the thing that funded the walls, the monuments, the empire, was quietly being rerouted around it. Shona oral tradition tells it differently, and just as hauntingly. They speak of a salt shortage, a missing resource so basic, so essential, that its absence became the story people told for why their ancestors finally walked away. Whether it was droughts, depleted soil, vanishing gold, shifting trade, or all of it compounding at once, by the second half of the 15th century, something had to give. So the people left, not overnight, not in one dramatic exodus, but gradually, the political and economic center of gravity shifted north and west. Some of the Shona elites relocated and founded a new state entirely, the Kingdom of Mutapa. Others formed the Kingdom of Butwa, centered at a new capital called Kami. Therefore, the empire didn't die. It moved. Its people, its bloodlines, its traditions, they carried on elsewhere. But the great stone city that had taken generations to build, that had once housed thousands and controlled a continent's gold trade, was left standing empty. Some evidence suggests small numbers of people may have continued living among the ruins for generations after, possibly into the 1600s. But the empire, the power, the golden age, that was over. Then for roughly 200 years, the world outside forgot the Great Zimbabwe existed, until Europeans arrived in the late 1800s. And when they did, they didn't just find lost ruins, they found something they refused to accept. When European explorers and colonists first laid eyes on the great enclosure in the 19th century, they were staring at the largest ancient structure built south of the Sahara. Precision cut stone, massive scale, clear evidence of a sophisticated, organized civilization. But instead of asking who built this, many of them decided in advance that Africans simply couldn't have. Therefore, colonial era writers invented alternative explanations. Theories that this must have been built by Phoenicians or connected to the biblical Queen of Sheba or some other outside civilization entirely. Anyone, it seemed, except the ancestors of the Shona people who were living in the region at the time. This wasn't a harmless historical mistake, it became convenient propaganda. If Great Zimbabwe wasn't built by Africans, then colonial powers could more easily justify the idea that African societies were incapable of complex achievements and therefore needed to be civilized and controlled. The myths served the colonizers' narrative almost too perfectly, and it got worse. Early excavators and treasure hunters, including teams connected to Cecil Rhodes, dug through the site carelessly, looting gold artifacts and destroying archaeological layers that could have definitively answered these questions decades earlier. Evidence was ripped out of the ground before it could even be properly studied. It took until well into the 20th century, through the careful work of archaeologists who returned to the evidence, honestly, for the true origin of Great Zimbabwe to be widely and officially acknowledged, that it was built by the ancestors of the Shona people. Full stop. No outside civilization required. The stones had been telling the truth the entire time. It just took over a century for anyone to stop arguing with them. Today, the ruins of Great Zimbabwe still stand, recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, walked by visitors who can run their hands along stone walls fitted together without mortar, exactly as they were laid down 7 centuries ago. And that carved soapstone bird, the one that once symbolized a king's connection to the divine, it didn't disappear either. Therefore, when the modern nation gained independence, it didn't just take inspiration from this ancient capital, it took its name, Zimbabwe, and it placed the image of that very bird at the center of its national flag, a direct, permanent link between a golden empire 700 years gone and the country that carries its memory forward today. Great Zimbabwe never fully vanished. It was walked away from. It was buried under other people's lies for a century, but it was never actually lost. It was just waiting for the truth to catch up. Thank you guys for watching. Do well to like, comment, share, subscribe, and walk with me again through the eyes of history.